Is it really true that any is a more popular function than ni? It's the question I want to ask today, and this is also in response to some questions I get from time to time from my loyal viewers. You know, as you may have noticed, one of my favorite methods these days, which I think is closest to my most natural approach to things, is to take questions as cues to exploring particular topics that are of practical concern to each and every one of you, and seeing how we can derive some empirical and theoretical derived derivations. That's a bit of a repetition. Derive some empirical observations and perhaps insights from these practical, in the moment types of questions. So in regard to any and ni, I would say both of those functions are popular in different ways. And to me, it's almost more interesting to ask, why are they popular than is one more popular than the other? Now the question, in what way is any popular and in what way is ni popular, that's an interesting question as well. But first, I just want to mention briefly that the fundamental reason we may not want to hear this, but one of the main reasons why any and ni are probably the two most popular functions, keeping in mind that this whole notion of popularity has a superficial ring to it. It's a human compulsion, but it is nevertheless somewhat superficial. The main reason is that the majority of people who have an active interest in MBTI and in Jungian types are end users. They are end users, and there is a latent, not always conscious desire to put oneself out there as the possessor of a highly valued function. Okay, so a little bit of a projection of self-esteem, which again is a perfectly human condition. It's always good to have that in mind. I mean, anyone who has been on a Discord server where there is a predominance of SE dominance, I have been on some of those servers, or at least high SE users, you'll notice something very obvious to predict, and it is simply that the most valued function on those servers is quite obviously SE. It's a very humbling and informative experience for high-end users, if a little lonely, to be on one of those servers. And I have no doubt that the same would apply to a server that is dominated by high TI users or high FI users. One of the advantages of Discord is that you have a bit of everything, you know, so a lot of really interesting formative experiences there. Now, in relation specifically to what makes any popular and what makes ni popular, it's true that the area of overlap is not total. What I would say is that most people would like to have ni, but a lot of people are in awe of ni. But I don't think that a lot of people necessarily want to have ni, precisely because they're a little bit in awe of it. And what belongs to the feeling of being in awe is, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it fear, but there is a certain amount of fear of the unknown that high ni dominance or high ni use represents, because it's not quite clear what you are going to do with it. And partly it's not quite clear what you're going to do with it because it's not quite clear what ni dominance do with it. In fact, INFJs are a very telling example here. To a lot of people, INFJs are kind of a little bit mysterious, specifically in how they use ni. I think people can tell that INFJs use ni, but if they were to ask, like to comment or to write down the way in which ni is used to arrive at particular conclusions, to make certain kinds of observations, it's not that easy to do. And precisely because ni has a mysterious way of being connected with archetypes. You know, there is a hypothesis that has been circulated among across Jungian forums for a long time, and I think has some validity. And Jung himself says that in his books too. He considers that to be a quite clear, if difficult to prove demonstrably, And it's that NI almost refers to something that, you know, the NISC axis refers to a mode of functioning that is very old, probably older than the NESI axis. Back to, back in an era, a very, very prehistorical era where intuition and instinct were so essential to a person's survival and orientation in the world that the instincts may be best encapsulated through SEUs, and the representations of the instincts and the sense of spatiality and temporality that sedimented around the instincts, that's what Jung calls the archetypes, were flourishing, and I think people were more in touch with that. For this reason, the NISC axis sometimes feels a little bit out of touch, or at least out of time, like it doesn't really belong to this time, makes people come across a bit otherworldly, particularly if they're NI dominants, a little bit like they stand outside the world. I think there is a reason, there are prehistorical sources for that, at least in part. And again, I want to reiterate that Jung believed that as well, and his concept of the archetype as something that is not abstract but quite concrete in the evolution of the psyche tends to bear that out. And that explains also why NI creates a sense of mystery and awe that are not always conducive to a feeling of envy and possessiveness. I think more curiosity and awe are at play here. Whereas in the case of NI, well, NI is also connected to intuition, so at some level it is also connected to the archetypes. The thing is, it's enacted, it's played out, it's visible, it's social a lot of the time, or at least it has social repercussions. People can get involved, people can get absorbed into the playfulness, people can be part of the game, people can enjoy this kind of play with reality, the elements of reality around them. So usually NI dominants, for better or worse, have this reputation of being playful, of being creative, of being in touch with reality. Now, they're not in touch necessarily with reality in a regimented, step-by-step, very systematic sense. They're playful and creative, but they're nevertheless in touch with reality. So in that respect, NI is less awe-inspiring, and I think it's a friendlier function altogether. I think to call NI a friendlier function and NI a less friendly function is probably on the money as far as I'm concerned. So always keep this in mind, and that explains the relative popularity of both functions. They have popularity, both of them do, but really not for the same reasons. Okay, so let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video, guys. Don't forget that giving me a like really helps with the referencing. And by the way, speaking of NI dominance, if you're interested in INFJ personalities, particularly INFJ personalities, but also INTJ, I've written a book called The Ecstatic Soul, which is the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind, what it's like to be an INFJ, what it's like to think like an INFJ, that you will find on the internet. A new look at the INFJ personality, The Ecstatic Soul. Check the link below if you'd like to hear more. And its sequel, my most recent book, is a further exploration of the INFJ personality. As you can see, it looks like a sequel. That's because it is a sequel. It's called The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World, and it looks at how INFJs can find happiness, purposefulness, drivenness, and meaningfulness in the world today, in a world that INFJ is often considered to be hostile and difficult to be authentic within. And yet I argue in this book that authenticity is actually key to INFJ flourishing. If you want to know more, the first link is a link to that book. And again, for both of those books, check the reviews, because they might just want to make you get the book. Lastly, guys, as usual, don't forget that my Patreon page is the absolute lifeblood of my channel. There's more and more of you providing support, and this is really helping me to keep producing quality content and really keep going with the channel. But I need more help. I could not do it without you, so please consider joining my Patreon page. The link is below. And be aware that there are perks associated with that. You get access to the community, of course, a bonus video every 2 weeks, which is an in-depth look at a topic from my mainstream YouTube or from my books. The next one, we'll see, but it's probably going to be about the impact of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy on my conception of Jungian types. Sometimes those videos are like 20-30 minutes. There's also a new Discord server that you can join automatically if you become a member, and it's growing there. We have having great discussions. You get access to all the members there and to myself. It's great. Consider it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.